Here you go.
There's the voice.
Welcome and good morning to everyone joining us here. We've got a good crowd already, and we're going to wait for folks to trickle in for just another minute before we get started with our agenda today. As we often do at these meetings, though, if you would like to be on camera, you sure can, but you don't have to. And you're welcome to introduce yourself in the chat box so we I'll get a sense of who's in the room with us today, since we can't all actually be in a room together. So go ahead and feel free to make use of that chat box to say hello to everyone. I'll give it another minute here as folks are joining. Welcome all. All right, Amber's kicking it off with the introductions in the chat box. So feel free, folks who just joined, to introduce yourself virtually by making use of the chat box there so we get a good sense of everyone who's here. So nice to see you all here this morning. Give it a good old 30 more seconds and then we'll kick it off. All right, now those chats are rolling in. All right, thanks everyone. I'm sure we'll get a few more folks trickling in, but we'll go ahead and kick it off. So welcome everyone. My name's Karina Heim. I'm the Coastal Training Program Coordinator at the Lake Superior Reserve, and this is the fall chaos meeting, member meeting. So I'm one of the steering committee members, and I'll be just kind of your host facilitator today. And so for those of you who might be joining this meeting for the first time or just need a little reminder because our last meeting was in July, CHAOS is a community of practice that was started back in 2020. And it's a place where Lake Superior coastal professionals and community leaders and interested folks can come together to share in some learning as we face some common coastal hazard challenges in the region. And so for today's agenda, our steering team for CHAOS kind of looked inward and realized that we've all have a nice collection of new resources that we can all, that we felt like we're ready to share with this audience. So today we're going to dig into some of those new resources with members of this steering team. So that's what you can look forward to today. I do want to encourage folks that we have a open chat box today. So if we're going to mostly ask folks to stay on mute for the meeting, but we will have Q&A portions after everyone presents. And if you have a comment or question to share, in the meantime, feel free to make use of that chat box. We'll be doing our best to take note of those comments as they come in and address them. And so I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to Kate as our first presenter here. So you might have noticed that I'm not Melanie. You might be used to seeing Melanie Perello at the helm of these meetings, and we're at sort of a transition point in CHAOS's leadership. So Kate Angel with the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program is going to provide a little update on the transitions with CHAOS right now and the search for a new coordinator. So I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Kate.
Thanks so much, Karina. Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Angel with the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program in Madison. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you all today. I'm just going to give a little bit of an update of where things are. We've had some transitions and some upcoming changes with CHAOS, and so I just wanted to give everyone an update on where we're at with that. So forgive me, I'm not great at driving and talking at the same time, but I will get my slideshow up here and start that off. So, all right. And I think I will minimize this window too so I can read my slides. Okay, so this is just a really quick update on chaos and transitions with the Coastal Hazards of Superior project. I'm sure many of you are well versed in the background of chaos, but I would guess that there are a few newbies on here too. And so I wanted to share a little bit on what chaos is. So Coastal Hazards of Superior is a community of practice that focuses on erosion and flooding and storm damage issues and resiliency affecting Lake Superior communities in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And this project really started with Minnesota's Lake Superior Coastal Management Program and a NOAA Coastal Management Fellowship that they had that started about 2 years ago. If you're interested in coastal management fellowships, I did include a link there and I can put these in the chat later as well. But it's a program that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has had for years that matches talented individuals with programs throughout the country. So Melanie Perello was the fellow on the project. She led the effort as part of her 2-year fellowship. It was one piece in her fellowship, but a big piece. She organized and led the community practice meetings, as well as a steering committee and meetings for that. She made newsletters and conducted outreach on it. And the steering committee that she pulled together had members from a lot of different organizations and agencies. You can see all of our logos there at the bottom. Oops. All right, so over the summer, Melanie's fellowship was coming to an end. 2 years goes really quickly, amazingly so. So as we realized that was going to be happening, the steering committee members had some chats about what some next steps could be. We had a lot of momentum going from this project. I feel like it was a very successful fellowship and effort with a community of practice. And there was a lot of interest in sustaining it as a way to communicate hazards issues and to information share and just to keep going with what has been going so well. So to do that, we looked at the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program. We looked to our partners at Wisconsin Sea Grant. We've had a number of successful fellowships with Sea Grant. The J. Philip Keeler fellowships have focused on hazards. They've all been located in Madison up to this point with somebody identified through Sea Grant and Sea Grant being the official employer, but having someone placed in a state agency. So we've had 5 fellows this way in our program, but Sea Grant has had a number of other fellows. I don't even remember, it might be in the 20s now for total fellows that they have placed with different state agencies and organizations. Great program, link there if you're interested. Keep an eye on that. There are different opportunities that come up all the time, but have had really good successes with that. So looking at that, but also having a slight twist on it and having someone located in the region, we reached out to our partners at Wisconsin Sea Grant and Lake Superior National Estuarine Research Reserve in Superior, Wisconsin, to try to develop a position and a location for this person. So we reached out to the Minnesota Lake Superior program as the group that started all of this, as well as Melanie. General concept behind this was to find someone who could continue to lead the community of practice and the steering committee and to do the newsletters and all the great work with coordination and reaching out to stakeholders and to develop responses to related projects over the course of 1 year. So we submitted the scope of work to our federal funding agency, which is NOAA, and it was approved. We were hoping that we might get Melanie to stick around and continue her great work, but she got scooped up by FEMA, so she will be leaving us in the region soon. I think I saw she was on the meeting here, but she is going to be leaving for a job with the federal government. So with that in mind, we looked to a new position, and this position will be a J. Philip Keeler Wisconsin Coastal Management Sea Grant Fellow. It's named after somebody who was a long-term outreach coordinator and engineer with Wisconsin Sea Grant, J. Philip Keeler. The position will be located at the National Estuarine Research Reserve in Lake Superior. We expect that this person is going to have a lot of coordination between the NER, the Lake Superior NER, and the Sea Grant staff who are stationed up there, as well as with coastal management in Madison and other Sea Grant staff in Madison too. It's a 1-year position. And the way the position is written, there are a few requirements and then quite a bit of flexibility as well. So it's an overarching goal to allow stakeholders to share experiences and resources and to connect them to technical experts and to identify and quantify risk and information gaps and to respond to challenges posed by hazards. So this is a long way of connecting the project to both what's been done so far and to the funding string that coastal management has available. This position will be doing a lot of outreach, continuing to coordinate the community of practice and to develop the newsletters, as well as respond to stakeholder inquiries and have regular communication between all the partner agencies and the steering committee. We also are going to task this person with developing a sustainability plan or looking at next steps for how either this community practice can develop and keep going, or if it makes sense to go in different directions, how that can happen, and just to have some sort of transition plan for when this one-year fellowship ends. Other tasks are to be determined, and they'll depend on the fellow's interests. These fellowships by design have some flexibility so that the person who is onboarded has the ability to pursue things as they come up or as their interests may lie, as their background may lie. But we will also, as a steering committee, look to guide some of the efforts and have some information exchanged that way, as well as responding to the needs of partners and communities. Position was posted, I think back, I don't remember the exact date, but sometime in September. There's a link there. It's still up if you want to see it. All the candidates have to be either postdoc or postmasters and have graduated in the last 5 years. The application deadline was October 17th, and we had a number of great applicants. We held interviews last week and are currently doing the background work that Sea Grant needs to do before giving an offer. So we're hoping to have that offer out quickly. The start date itself will depend on the candidate's schedule, as well as the schedule of the people at Lake Superior who will be housing this person. And that, oh, and it's funded through our partners at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration who let us make this happen. So with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing. Anyone who has questions on it is more than welcome to reach out to me or throw something in the chat and I'll try to respond. But watch this space. Hopefully we'll have someone before our next meeting and get the person identified to lead from there. So, Karina, is there anything else? Any questions? I didn't see anything in the chat.
I didn't see anything in the chat either. Thank you, Kate, for that overview of where we're at with chaos leadership and next steps. And glad we have some good candidates. And I do have something for everyone here who's joined, if there aren't any questions for Kate right off the bat. So our steering team for chaos was thinking about how we haven't really collected input in a while on what are some of the coastal topics that are front of mind for everyone in this group right now. And we realized we could really use that sort of refresher guidance from you all about where we can put the energies of chaos going forward, and especially to start this new coordinator off on a good foot. So taking advantage of you all being here right now, we do have a Zoom poll for everyone. I'm going to go ahead and launch it. And what we're going to ask you to do with this poll is identify topics and issues where you want more in-depth training and support in the context of chaos. I have set it up. I'm assuming folks can see the poll now. And I have set it up so that you can answer more than one. If you find yourself checking all the boxes or nearly all of them, I would ask you to maybe limit yourself to your top 5 so that we can really get a sense of priority from this poll. Are folks seeing that poll? Okay, now I'm seeing answers come in. So it looks like yes. Okay. Thanks for voting. I'm going to leave this up for a while because this is pretty important to our team, so we can get a sense of where folks' needs are at. I'm not sure if you all can see those responses in real time, but I'm seeing a lot of votes for coordinated shoreline protection efforts. So that's really good for us to know. Achieving natural nature-based infrastructure is right up there too. I'm going to give it another couple seconds here because I still see a few votes. Actually, now it looks like everyone's votes are in. All right. Thanks, everyone. Closing the poll here. Thanks so much for doing that. That's really helpful for us. And I'll just share the results because you might be curious about what folks said. So we'll be taking those and mulling those over and sharing them with a new coordinator when they come on board. Okay. Thanks for playing. Our next speaker up is Madison Rodman with Minnesota Sea Grant. This is a really fun opportunity to hear about a new game-based tool, which is an addition to the suite of tools known as the Watershed Game. There's a new Coast Model edition, and Madison's going to tell us all about how this tool can help folks think about how we improve water quality and increase community resilience in the context of coastal communities. So I'm going to turn it over to Madison now to tell us about this tool.
Yes, it's both. So hi, everyone. I'm so glad to join you here today. I'm Madison Rodman with Minnesota Sea Grant, and I'm actually going to share two things from Minnesota Sea Grant. So sneak peeks of two, both the Watershed Game and another project that's coming up. So first, I'm going to talk about that Watershed Game Coast Model that Karina mentioned, and then just give you a sneak preview of the Lake Superior Water Levels course, which is another project that we've been working on here in Minnesota Sea Grant. So first, the Watershed Game Coast Model. And as you can see, here's our whole partner team. I am not alone on this project. It is a collective effort from all the folks that you see here and our affiliations on the screen. And it's been a multi-year process. So we're really excited. We're at the finish line. We can see it. The games are at the printers right now. So I'm going to give you a bit of background about the Watershed Game in general, just in case this is something new for you, you've never heard of it. The game was designed over 12 years ago and is in use in over 20 states. You've likely played the game or maybe even facilitated it yourself. But if you're not familiar, if this doesn't seem like it's ringing a bell from a meeting in the past, in the Watershed Game, participants work in land use teams around a large stylized kind of watershed map to play through a simulation. They learn how a variety of land uses impact our water and increase their knowledges of best management practices represented by tool cards in our game, and learn how specific choices they make can reduce adverse impacts. Here, folks are playing the lake version of the game. So like Karina said, there are multiple versions of the Watershed Game. It's a full Watershed Game program, which includes a stream model, a lake model, a river model, and a classroom version. And about 2 years ago, feedback indicated that there was new need for a coastal model. So we had detailed review, a survey, focus groups, in which we've written those all up in a report and now an upcoming journal article. A new coast model for local leaders was developed and is here. And when we say local leaders, we think of that really broadly. So it can include those elected and appointed officials that we know about, community leaders, folks from watershed organizations, or any adult audience that has a role in developing plans, applying practices, or adopting policies integral to water management in their area. So I'm going to give you a few lightning highlights of the coast version. So first, here's the Coast Model game board. It's a fictional landscape, which might look familiar to many of you, or maybe there are pieces that you identify with. It contains a large river and estuary, tributaries that drain into a coastal area. It includes both natural areas and population centers, along with a variety of coastal industries. And we intended this landscape to be representative of a variety of coasts, so both ocean and Great Lakes. And the goal of the game is very similar to our previous versions. It's to use your limited financial resource, which is very like real life, to reduce the excess nitrogen, phosphorus, or sediment to levels that meet a clean water goal, all at the same time while improving community resilience to flooding. So there are 5 land uses in our coast model, and I'm going to start in the bottom left corner and work my way around. And they include an industrial port, areas that include manufacturing, transportation, construction, shipping, and other extractive industries. Moving up to the left, we have an agricultural land use area. This has land that's used for food production, animal production, crops, grazing, and forestry. There is an urban center area, so featuring high density urban, commercial, and developed land, residential area, which is suburban neighborhood style development, and a rural coast, which has natural forests, rural residences, a working waterfront, recreational opportunities, and even a barrier island. And so during the game, each of these land uses will use their limited financial resources to play tool cards to reduce their pollutant of concern. So it could be nitrogen, sediment, or phosphorus, depending on your community's kind of current issues, while increasing their resilience to flooding. At the same time, there are also real life challenges. They pay flood insurance, encounter unanticipated events such as flooding or harmful algal blooms. And in the final round, play requires our participants to work cooperatively across land use teams to meet the watershed clean water goal and collectively win the game. So about these tool cards. So I'm going to zoom in and show you 4 here today. We can't show you them all. Here's our rural coast land use and 2 tool cards of the 50 in the game. If you're playing on the rural coast land use team, you have to choose between tools like this based on available funds, benefits, and feasibility. And if you look at the tools, we have support flood resilient retrofits and restore coastal wetlands. Each tool card has a different cost and has different reductions for our pollutants of concern and how they increase resiliency. And so when you play these tool cards, you spend money to fix areas in your coastal community. Next, I'm going to zoom in on some tool cards in our industrial port. These are managed dredge material property and stabilized working access areas. And throughout the game, each team will have the opportunity to play 3 of these tool cards to meet their clean water goal and to increase the resiliency. And I'm not going to be able to go more into gameplay here, but I just wanted to give you a sneak peek on this exciting program and tool. And it's one that I'm really excited to roll out. I'm looking forward to seeing it used to spark conversations here in our Western Lake Superior region and across the Great Lakes. And like I said earlier, the game boards are literally coming off the printers right now. So the project team has been actively hosting demos and trainings of this tool. And the next steps of the game will be completing a classroom version that's focused more on our youth audience and just continuing to get this tool out into the hands of folks that might want to use it. It is a physical in-person product, so just know how that might affect, when you might be able to use it with your various stakeholders. So there's going to be a link in the chat, which we can post in a little bit. So if you'd like to learn more, kind of stay in the know about the Watershed game, I invite you to fill that out and we'll make sure to add you to our email list. So when the next training or opportunity comes out, you will be the first to know. Okay, so we're going to pivot a bit. And the second project I'm going to share is about the Lake Superior Water Levels course, which has been produced by myself and the colleagues here from Minnesota Sea Grant that you see on the screen in front of you. First, a little bit of how do we get to a water levels course? Some of you might have heard this before or heard whispers of it, but as many of you are familiar, or you're all familiar, we've experienced a large swing here in Lake Superior from below average water levels to above average water levels and record highs here in the last 20 years or so. So in 2019 and 2020, we saw 7 new monthly mean high water records or ties, and these fluctuations in water levels left many property owners and residents along Lake Superior shorelines with questions, and folks embarking on their first shoreline projects that they may have ever done on their property. And during this period, there also was an excellent highs and lows conference organized by many of the folks on the call today. I wasn't able to attend, but I heard it was great, which brought together stakeholders for a day-long conference. And one of the outcomes of this conference was a list of what folks in our regions need relating to water level variation. And one of those topics was public outreach on water levels. And so with some funds from Sea Grant, Jesse Schomburg, Tiffany Sprague, and myself were all set to embark on a series of workshops on water levels in the summer of 2020 in small communities up the Lake Superior shore. Sounds great, right? Well, as we know, COVID had other plans, so we pivoted. And so we had more discussions with our stakeholders and leaned into the strength and flexibility of virtual programming, which could help us address the same goals of those original workshops, along with meeting the varied learning preferences of our public audience. And although we know the synchronous webinars and meetings work well for professional groups like us today, they're not always accessible or engaging to public participants. So all of our brainstorming and pivoting led us to the Lake Superior Water Levels course, which was designed to provide the public with a solid foundation of water level and coastal process concepts before they take on a project, or just to help them better understand their property or Lake Superior a little bit better. So the three kind of key purpose points here are to enhance the public understanding of Lake Superior water levels and the factors that affect them, provide opportunities to access information about various management strategies, and offer connection with local resources and contacts. And we acknowledge that we're not going to solve every Lake Superior problem and every lake level problem the public might have with the material we're providing in this course. But we do expect that everyone that takes it will be able to gain the knowledge they need to make good science-based decisions and to know the right questions to ask when they do meet with professionals. So they have a little bit more background knowledge and confidence going into those meetings and conversations. So a little bit on course format. We are using the University of Minnesota's learning platform called Canvas. So it's the same thing they use for their online classes and blended learning classes to deliver our information. And we're providing it over 5 parts, which we're calling modules. And the course will be free, self-paced, and asynchronous. So folks can log in at any time and revisit material whenever works for them in their schedule, or whenever they are in a location with internet connectivity. The content will be varied and include short videos, animations, text material for reading, links to outside resources, and opportunities for activities, focusing on some of the tools that our partners have available. Throughout the course, there'll be moments for check for understanding quizzes, so not for us to grade them, but just for an ability to make sure that the concepts are sinking in and provide participants with a moment to reflect on the material presented. A great thing about online courses is that they are easily updatable and modifiable as conditions or materials change. There is no capacity limit. And really, we designed this course to align with current Minnesota DNR and SWCD guidance. So we're kind of all speaking the same language so that when people approach our partners, they will have the same information. So the 5 modules cover topics that span from the basics 101 on drivers of water levels to some coastal process information, information about our climate, shoreline management, best management practices, an overview of shoreline protection options, and an outline of how to embark on a shoreline project, kind of the process. I'm not going to go into all the details, but you can kind of see them here on the screen of how we build the concepts from maybe beginning level to more complex as we go through the modules. So who's the audience for this course? Well, it was primarily designed for residents and property owners in Lake and Cook County, Minnesota, but really it's open to anyone and of value to anyone living on the coast. So anyone's allowed to participate, but we had those residents in Lake and Cook County in mind when we prepared it. So like the Watershed Game, we're really excited to be nearing the finish line for this course. We had a little delay and we're still kind of finalizing some content and doing some editing, but we really hope to plan to release the course in the next few months or so. And ultimately, we hope this course fills the needs many of you identified over the last few years and at the Highs and Lows conference, and we look forward to using it and modifying the course to continue to meet the needs of the public and our partners. So I will take, I think I might be running out of time, but I will take any questions folks might have, and I will put the link in the chat so you can receive updates on both the Watershed Game Coast Model and the Lake Superior Water Levels course. But thank you so much. I'm glad to share these two new exciting tool and a project program coming from Minnesota Sea Grant.
Wow, thanks, Madison. Those are 2 really robust new tools that I'm excited to see. And I'm wondering if folks have questions for Madison. Well, we've got her here. Feel free to come off mute and ask too, if you do have any. When the lake levels tool is available, Madison, is it most easily accessed through Minnesota Sea Grant's website? Is that the plan?
Yes, so we'll have a new web page that will kind of advertise that course, and you'll have a link to register, and then it will kind of work you through to get you into the Canvas course.
Right on. And Melanie asked, will there be a local launch for the Watershed Game?
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, so that's the goal, is when there's the right moment for us to gather in person, it would be great to gather around the Coast Model of the Watershed Game. Nothing's planned just yet, and we're still waiting for the right moment when it's safe to bring people around a conference table. The Watershed Game coast model is, I think, 3 feet by 8 feet. So you push together 2 banquet tables and you can gather up to 20 people around it. And so that means close together and working together in person. So everyone's just waiting for the right moment, but I hope there will be a launch, and I know we have some trained facilitators among us. So if there is one, we will advertise it broadly, and hopefully our chaos group will be some of the first to play it together.
Thanks. I don't see any more questions coming in. And I'll just invite folks, if you do, if you can think of audiences that you are interested in sharing either of these tools with when they become available, or if either of these, excited you and you want to share some of your ideas in the chat, that might be fun for folks to see, or helpful to know if you have audiences in mind you'd like to connect with these tools. But thanks, Madison, for that.
Yes, thanks, Karina.
Okay. Well, we're going to transition to our next speaker now. So next we're going to hear from Amber Westerbur with Minnesota's Lake Superior Coastal Program. So there's an exciting new Living Shorelines pilot project underway, and Amber is going to let us know more about that project and what we can expect from it. So I'll turn the time right over to you, Amber.
Great, thank you so much, Karina. Working through my first share here, so bear with me.
There you go.
I see it on my end. I'm hoping you're seeing too. Thanks, Karina, for the affirmative on that. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Amber Westerbur, and I am absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to share a little bit about a new project that Minnesota's Lake Superior Coastal Program launched in July. So before I do that, I have a little quiz. And by little, I mean one question. So Karina, would you go ahead and launch that for me now?
I am getting it up. Here you go. Can you see it?
Sweet. Yes. So it is a question about Minnesota shoreline. What percentage of Minnesota shoreline is hard, meaning it has some kind of engineered or artificial structure? And your options are 7, 10, 17, or 25%. Love it.
Looks like we might have full participation. Should I
yes.
end and share? Okay.
Bring that baby up.
There we go.
All right, so the leading contender was, looks like 17%. Actually, the correct answer is 10%. So congratulations to those of you who went ahead and answered B. So if you look at that in terms of numbers, besides out of percentages, we've got approximately 26 of the 264 miles that NOAA mapped in 2019 are hard. So that means 90% of Minnesota's shore is still natural. And that really underscores to me the importance of using living shorelines to manage coastal erosion. So term check, living shorelines. Living shorelines use plants and other natural elements, sometimes in combination with harder shoreline structures, to stabilize estuarine coasts, bays, and tributaries. They are more adaptable to changing conditions, like the high and low lake levels that we are experiencing, as well as storm events. And they also offer a number of co-benefits, like providing habitat, improving water quality, and encouraging recreation. So with those kind of benefits, why aren't they everywhere? Well, first, if you were to go out and do a little internet research on living shorelines, you would likely find a lot of things out on the East Coast, a couple out on the West Coast, and very few on the Great Lakes. And I think, as we all know, it can be a little scary to go out and do something different, especially when you're making an investment of this size. Secondly, we know how structures like revetments and breakwaters work. If you have the right information, they're relatively easy for engineers to be able to design. But with living shorelines, there's no shortage of design questions. Questions come up like, how do living shorelines handle the freeze-thaw cycle that we have here in Minnesota, or the ice cover that we have here on Lake Superior? And we're not talking about same kind of conditions as folks have out east. So given the conditions that we have, what designs are really going to work? The coastal program, with funding and support from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, is setting out to change that. I think, as we all know, change can be hard. So we are starting small with 4 pilot sites in 4 gems on the North Shore. We're hoping to have 1 pilot site at the Minnesota Point Scientific and Natural Area in Duluth. We're looking at 1 at the Flood Bay Wayside Rest, north of 2 harbors. Looking at having a site at the Twin Points Public Water Access, which is located between 2 harbors and Silver Bay. And then our final spot is in Temperance River State Park, which is in Cook County, between the communities of Schroeder and Tofte. We have a 5th site that is at Gooseberry Falls State Park. That's our backup location in the event we run into problems on any of these sites with the required environmental or cultural review. So our first step in this process has really been focused on gaining knowledge. And for that step, we've enlisted the help of a contractor, Tetra Tech. Between Tetra Tech and a multidisciplinary team with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, we've taken the time to ask questions, inquire about site conditions, and looked openly to the variety of data sources to identify the best living design alternatives for the sites, given the local circumstances and our project goals. And because of that effort, we now have preferred living shoreline approaches recommended for each of our 5 sites. And as they're looking at them, they break out into 3 main types. So the first is green riprap. And again, throwing out the flag, term check. Green riprap is a small scale, low cost restoration technique for improving existing riprap shorelines. So it involves planting in the spaces between the riprap with native plants. And I've got a few pictures of what green riprap projects will look like. These do happen to be sites out on the Chesapeake Bay, but it gives you an idea of what the technique looks like both before they're on the top, as things are growing in the middle, and what it looks like when it is mature. Green riprap has some notable benefits. They can reduce wave energy, increase habitat, provide nutrient filtration, and capture sediment. But like most things, there are drawbacks. For example, they don't provide protection from high waters. Invasive species can limit the success of vegetation growth, and there's no reduction in storm surges. In addition, green riprap only works in small areas. So the second category are sills. Term check again. A sill is a rock structure placed parallel to the shore with native plants behind it. And here again are a few different pictures, help you kind of visualize what I'm talking about. There are several benefits to sills. They too can reduce wave energy. They will slow down inland water movement. They can increase the natural water infiltration from storm events, increase habitat, and they also provide tow protection. They're not a silver bullet. They're not perfect. Here again, they lack the ability to provide protection from high waters. Invasive species, again, can limit success, and there's no reduction in storm surges. They're also a bit more costly than green riprap or our third option, which is vegetation only. So finally, the third option, vegetation only. And I don't think there's a need for a term check here. But as the name implies, this technique involves planting native vegetation and woody plant cuttings. There's more pictures here to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that are possible. The benefits are numerous. They can reduce that wave energy, slow down inland water movement, increase natural water infiltration from storm events, increase habitat, increase connectivity to the aquatic and terrestrial habitats, and increase water storage. As an added bonus, they provide minimal impact to existing habitat conditions. Drawbacks are similar to the other techniques. There's no protection from high waters. The competition with invasive species, again, can limit the success of the vegetation growth, and there's no reduction in the storm surge. And we're looking at having to do vegetation only in relatively small areas. So what's next? Well, this fall and early winter, Tetra Tech is going to be going into the design phase. We are aiming to have design plans that are 60% complete by the end of December. With those plans in hand, NOAA will begin their formal review, including consultation with tribal nations. And as spring turns to summer, we hope to begin on-site work with all of that on-site work wrapped up before the leaves start to turn in the fall. Now, it is really important to us that we learn throughout this entire process. I noted that we had spent a considerable amount of time here in the beginning learning about, asking questions about the sites and the information that we know about the conditions. And we really want to be able to continue to learn throughout the process. Particularly, we want to be able to share what we learn with what we're learning through our process with others who might be contemplating such a project. So that brings me to one last question. What would you like to see come out of the project in terms of outreach? So if you're feeling up to it, please come off of mute and share your thoughts verbally. If you'd rather just kind of put them into the chat, that would be great too. But I can't underscore enough that your input is really going to help us with this equally important part of the project. So what kind of ideas? Great, nice. Thanks, Mindy. I've seen tours of sites during construction to show methods. Awesome. Video tours. Nice. Thanks, Madison. Plant lists, good. Nicole asked a question about monitoring designs into the future, and yes, that is indeed part of our plan to monitor here before as well as after. Still figuring out exactly what that is going to entail, but we know it's an important part, and so definitely we'll be including it. So it's a plant list, monitoring data over time, method selection process, great. How effective they are comparatively. Oh, I love it. Operation and maintenance, good. Limitations. Oh, the ideas are coming. I love it. Thank
Ask and you shall receive.
I
Amber.
know, that's exactly what I wanted. This is tremendous. Fact sheets with costs, partner photos, good. Partners, photos. Sweet. Good. Well, you guys can keep those ideas coming. Like I said, it's really going to help us with this important part of the project. So I've asked my question. Now is your time to ask questions of me.
I'll jump in
Go
if I
for it,
could,
Karina.
Amber.
Excellent.
Just if you have really early ideas about what will constitute success or not success, like how will we know if things are working, and how is that going to be measured? I realize it's a big question, but if you have any early ideas about that, I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, that's a great question, Karina. I think really one of the main ones, and it might sound a little bit trivial, is just to have these out there and available for people to see, and particularly to be able to see out in this region. And I think we are equally looking at that learning process, and trying to document and show the things that we are challenged with, how we may be overcoming those, and recognize them. And so be as open about the process that we are going through and the experience that we're having, so that others can equally learn from it. And I know there will be more subsets and derivations as we move a little bit forward into the project, but I'm really excited to see them out on the ground, and then documenting this full process that we've been through.
Thanks, Amber. And there have been some good questions that have come in.
Great.
Mindy asked what lake level the contractors will be considering the new normal for Lake Superior in this process, if you know.
That is a good question, and I do not know. I do know that Tetra Tech, they've been working with us throughout this process, and is keyed in very well to the fact that we have a very dynamic lake and that those lake levels fluctuate. But I will put that on my radar screen of definite questions to follow up and ask. Thanks, Mindy.
And Nicole asked in the chat if you can provide more specific location info, such as maps of where the proposed work is to be done. Excellent. Whether that's now or later.
Great. That's a great question. And as I was preparing today and doing a dry run through, that very question dawned on me. Like, that works to describe it if you're familiar with Minnesota, but it doesn't if you're not. So I put my colleague Clint Little on the on standby to show a map. Clint, would you be able to share that now? Help everybody orientate where the specific locations are for these pilot sites. Thanks, Clint. So we're started down there. There's the points there. Minnesota Point is down on Minnesota Point. The very end, moving in. Got 2 tentative areas kind of marked off. We've gone larger in our scope at this point, just to make sure that we are leaving ourselves the most options in association with that. Clint,
I was
any
just
sites?
I was gonna talk and my I was gonna talk and my assistant here jumped up in my lap and tore the headphones out of my ears.
Our coastal dog, huh?
My coastal dog, yeah. So yeah, he's excited because he goes out and checks this area with me. But the original push pin was over here where we've been out and we've been looking at a section of beach in this location.
Great. Good. So kind of moving up the shore then brings us to Twin Points.
And I'll just do a little time check here with y'all. We might have to keep this tour part a little bit short, but perhaps with some information about how to contact you all later too.
Great, great. So
Just
we'll cruise through this, and then I'll make sure that we get to other questions offline if need be. So thanks for raising them.
Yeah, I went to Flood Bay.
Yep.
First, Amber. Sorry.
That's great. Thank you. Flood Bay is the site where we'll be looking at the green riprap. And moving up to Twin Points water access. Again, more in the cove. Isn't directly associated. I mean, it's on the public, on the access point, but it's not directly associated with the access location. And then Temperance is our most northern point. And there is a location there closer to the campground that we are looking at for our site.
That's really helpful for sharing. And I think we can get to Tom's question real quick before we move on. And Tom had asked, will lake ice cover and ice movement be taken into consideration in these project designs, as this has considerable impact and force to shorelines?
Indeed, yes. Again, we've done a lot of data discovery, raised questions with Tetra Tech about that very issue, and we are going to work very hard to make sure that all of those pieces are taken into consideration as these ideas now of preferred alternatives are moving from ideas to actually real life designs. So thanks for that question as well, Tom.
Thanks, Amber and Clint, for the walkthrough and the tour, and thanks to everyone for raising really good questions and needs throughout. I think it probably only serves to help y'all as you're launching into this. So
does it totally. So a great group of folks to have reached out, and I appreciate the enthusiasm with which you shared ideas and posed questions. And my contact information was flashed up. I'll add it to the chat one more time. Please keep the lines of communication open. Always love to hear from folks. Great. Thanks, Amber. Thank you.
all right, we're gonna switch over now to hear from Adam Bechle with Wisconsin Sea Grant. There's been 2 new resources published recently that may be of interest to this group. So Adam's going to share a little bit about both of those resources with us. The first is a nature-based shorelines guide, and the second is the property owner's guide to protecting your bluff. So I'm going to turn it right over to Adam to give us some more details about these resources that are out in the world now.
And Adam, we're not hearing you.
Yeah, no mic sounds from you. I know we had it earlier, so.
It looks like now you're on mute too.
Mhm. Here, I don't know if you want to be unmuted, Adam. You can give me a thumbs up or down.
Okay.
Yeah, there you
You
are.
can hear me now.
Yes, correct. We can.
Anything?
Yes, Adam, we can hear you. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, in the middle of the last presentation, my computer announced that I was unmuted and then the audio changed. So sorry about that. It was working before we started, but it did that in the middle of the presentation. So yeah, so I put the links to these new guides in the chat. So really excited. They were just published in the last few weeks online. Have also some printed copies if folks are interested in those. But these were some guides that were produced from Coastal Resilience Grant, NOAA funded grant with the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, the University of Wisconsin-Madison College of Engineering, and Wisconsin Sea Grant, where I work. So we're really fortunate to have this project working in Southeastern Wisconsin, but also able to put together some guides that we think are going to be pretty useful around the Great Lakes, especially up in the Lake Superior area. So as Karina mentioned, first guide I'm going to talk about is our nature-based shoreline options for Great Lakes coasts. And so to get to these guides, before I jump into them, they're on our Wisconsin Sea Grant publication store, which you can either type in that link or put the link in the chat. But if you want to find them later, if you do a web search for Wisconsin Sea Grant, you go to our website. And then you might see a picture of me at some point, but then in our resources section, Sea Grant publications.
So Adam, we're not seeing your
publication
screen.
Store.
Oh.
And then these are housed in the coastal engineering section. So that's how you can navigate to see these or tell folks to find them if you don't have the URL. So there, if you want to download them and take a look while I'm talking, first download the nature-based shoreline options for Great Lakes coasts. And I'm very happy that Amber did a lot of the intro for me. Nature-based shorelines, living shorelines, engineering with nature, these terms are used pretty synonymously. There may be some minor differences, but they all get to the use, mimicking or use of natural features to stabilize the coast. So Amber gave the example of vegetation, beaches, reefs, all sort of natural features that we use to try and stabilize the coast. So that's what this guide is about. There's not a lot of information out there for the Great Lakes, as Amber mentioned, a lot on the Atlantic and Gulf Coast, some on the Pacific Coast. But if you search around for Great Lakes, living shorelines, Great Lakes nature-based shorelines, there's not a lot of information. And when we started working on this guide a few years ago, there really was a lot less. So the goal of this guide is to kind of give an overview of the type of options that we've seen work in the Great Lakes and provide some case study examples and start to make folks aware of what these types of practices are and demonstrate some successful instances in the Great Lakes. And of course, this isn't going to be an exhaustive list. It's not a design guide. It's really giving considerations of where different options might work. And of course, it's great that this guide is, although it's just been published, is starting to be outdated because folks like Amber are leading a charge with the Minnesota Coastal Program and other places around the Great Lakes to start doing demonstration projects. And so there's going to be more examples and more options out there as time goes on. And so we'll try to keep this information updated in the future. But right now, this is sort of what we've had from a review of all the Great Lakes. And I'd like to acknowledge the authors of this. Brianna Shea was a student that worked on this guide, myself, and Jean Clark, the former coastal engineering outreach specialist with Wisconsin Sea Grant. So I'll cut to the chase of what we've come up with. So we have six types of nature-based shorelines that we've seen working well in the Great Lakes. Oyster bed reefs and mangroves, those don't work here. Those are popular in our warmer, saltier climates. And so we've got vegetation, nourishment, slope stabilization, edging, sills, and ecologically enhanced hard armoring. So some of those you might see parallels from Amber's presentation. So this is our summary guide. I'll get into each option individually. So this is a bit overwhelming of a summary, but it's kind of nice when the printed guide. So we looked at each of these types of options. Okay. Yes, I cannot hear you. Sorry about that. So we kind of examined each type of option across the top and rated them relative to each other for things like environmental benefits. Amber hit on a lot of those, providing habitat, filtering stormwater. But we know these different options are not going to be suitable everywhere. So looking at them relative to wave energy environments that they might be suitable with. The coastal slopes that they're on, are they on gentle slopes or steep eroding slopes? Relative costs to each other. And then with this vegetation and other natural features, maintenance is maybe more of a requirement than we might think of when we build a revetment. We don't have to keep a revetment alive. We do have to maintain it and make sure it's not damaged, but we don't have to weed out invasive revetments or invasive stones like we do for plants. So this is sort of the large framework that this guide is written on, looking at these 6 different options. And then on the bottom here, just compare it to a conventional hard armoring. So our first option is vegetation. So vegetation is planted on the shore to reinforce sediment with its roots, dissipate wave energy to some extent with the stems, and be able to slow down runoff and wind that might also erode from the land side. And so in terms of environmental benefits, again, on that relative scale, that's pretty high. We're adding habitat, adding vegetation, stormwater filtration. Wave energy environments that just vegetation can survive in is kind of limited because the roots only have so much strength to hold against waves. They need to be on relatively stable slopes. Otherwise, things like runoff on a really steep eroding slope, the vegetation may not be able to establish. Can be pretty low cost, but there is maintenance requirements involved to weed out invasive species, a lot of things that Amber mentioned. So we have a case study for each of these types. And for this one, we have Bradford Beach in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Bradford Beach had a lot of issues with water quality. It did have stormwater infrastructure kind of outletting onto the beach. And that was flowing across the beach face and causing water quality issues. So their main concern with that project was taking care of the water quality. And so they used the vegetation in a vegetated bioswale down in this depression to filter out the stormwater, but then along the sides planted dune grass for erosion to keep the bioswale from filling in with sand blown off the beach. And it was able to do this on sort of a relatively open coast environment where wave energy is high, because there is a nice wide beach there to break the wave energy. And so normally on just kind of the open coast of Lake Michigan or Lake Superior, vegetation, you'd need a site with special considerations to deal with the wave energy. This is one of those instances where it had a nice wide beach where that vegetation could survive. Nourishment, the placement of clean sediment, often sand on beaches or dunes or nearshore waters to replace sand that's been lost or to help build dunes. This can have some good environmental benefits, providing beach sand, but also the placement of the sand can sometimes have impacts on ecosystems. The range of wave energy this can work in varies. It's a site-specific design. It's not going to work on our steepest eroding slopes, and the cost can vary quite a bit. And one thing to note about nourishment is typically where that sand is placed is not where it's going to end up. And I'll try to illustrate that with this graphic. A lot of times the sand is kind of distributed naturally by waves into where the waves want to make it go in that dynamic system. And we really have a hard time putting it in the exact right spot. So, and also if waves or the cause of erosion is not addressed, so often which it is not, the sand will also sort of be lost over time. And so our case study kind of illustrates that. This case study is from Blue Harbor Beach in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So when they built this resort, they built a revetment to protect it and then buried it with nourished sand. So they essentially created a dune system. So they hardened the shoreline, but then immediately covered it with sand to provide recreation area as well as habitat. And so this functions at low water levels, being a nice wide dune system. And then at high water levels, when that sand gets eroded and lost, the revetment provides a backstop to keep erosion from attacking the large investment that was made there. So this was a case of marrying nourishment with a hybrid with a hardened structure, as Amber discussed in her presentation. Moving to slope stabilization as another technique. We may not think of slope stabilization immediately as nature-based solution, a living shoreline, but if our slopes on the coast are too steep and too eroding, vegetation really has a hard time establishing. So we don't have any of those beneficial root systems taking hold. We don't have habitat provided there. So we viewed this as a nature-based option if it was combined with vegetation. So regrading or reinforcing an eroding slope to allow vegetation to establish. So the wave energy here is quite variable. It really depends on is there any other tow protection? If there is, then it can be used in a very high wave energy environment. If not, usually slope stabilization on its own might not last for a long time because the waves will continue to erode the tow. Our case study here was the former University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee Chancellor's residence in Shorewood, Wisconsin. You can see in this picture from 2012 that there was erosion, I think it was 8 feet from the foot of the residence. Not a lot of options to move this residence or regrade that slope because there was only 8 feet to work with. So what happened was they built a vegetated retaining wall, essentially, of geotextile fabric that had seed in it, and they planted in between that seed and were able to build a living wall, is what it's called. And so they also revegetated the rest of the bluff, but in a situation where they're able to work with limited space they had, build a vertical retaining wall that had vegetation built into it, and create a very aesthetically pleasing solution to this issue. Moving up in sort of wave energy, we have edging, which is starting to do something to sort of protect the tow against waves. And so this is the placement of just a small amount of material, wood, stones, or coconut fiber logs at the toe of the shoreline to provide a little bit of wave protection to try and help vegetation establish. So we're working together with vegetation, have those roots hold the soil, but also provide a little bit of a wave break. So wave energy environment we're looking at, still not open coast necessarily, maybe a more sheltered area. But again, trying to provide a little bit more wave protection where vegetation alone won't survive. And also, again, not on steep eroding slopes. So case study here is Shoreline Park in Sandusky, Ohio. This is in Sandusky Bay, so a little bit protected, not the open coast of Lake Erie, but still experiencing issues with wave erosion. This embayment, you can see the mark of erosion. And another problem at this park was geese. There were geese, pooping all over the place. Water quality was bad, and just the general experience of being in that park was hindered by the presence of geese. So what they did was they put in this core log edging along the shoreline. You can see it on the left-hand side of the photo here, and revegetated with native plants. So that protected the shoreline from erosion, as well as deterred geese from coming from the water up onto the land. So it really improved not only the shoreline erosion, it improved the aesthetic and water snakes, apparently, pardon me, Karina. Maybe those ate the geese, I don't think so, but so really, again, with the co-benefits that Amber talked about of the living shoreline approach, as opposed to their other option, which have been putting down a revetment. Moving up in wave energy, Amber mentioned this option, a sill, a low profile structure in the water, just kind of offshore, that dissipates wave energy when it hits the sill and creates an area where we can kind of grow a protected marsh. So handles a little bit higher wave energy and has those environmental benefits by enabling vegetation to establish. And so we have a real nice case study here from Marysville, Michigan. They replaced a failing sheet pile wall on the St. Clair River with this sill that has a marsh vegetation and then some stone edging. And so this was when they constructed it at low water levels. And so when water levels came up, we could see they designed it basically for the top of the sill to kind of be where the high water level mark is. The marshed vegetation looks much different, but still, you know, functioning and surviving based on vegetation selection. And then it's sort of backed by this small stone edging. So certainly a lot more habitat available and a lot more species abundance after construction, as opposed to when that steel sheet pile wall was there. And then our last technique of nature-based shorelines is ecologically enhanced hard armoring. And so this is sort of what Amber talked about with the green riprap. So this is vegetation, textured structures, or other features added to hard armoring to help provide habitats and other benefits. So there's a couple ways to do this. If there's a breakwater, which is more substantial than a sill, being able to add small stones for fish habitat, plant marsh vegetation, or on the bottom here we see this sort of joint planted revetment or green riprap, trying to encourage vegetation growth. We need maybe a little bit more hardening to keep the shoreline from eroding, but also trying to add habitat where we can. And so the case study here is Sam Myers Park in Racine, Wisconsin. It was a park kind of protected by this breakwater, but it was frequently overtopped and overtaken by Phragmites. So they raised the breakwater to protect this area, and then were able to rip out all that invasive species and plant restored wetland community to help with water quality and erosion. So again, this is, you know, hard armor there, but definitely doing a lot of work to create an ecologically rich environment there. So what does the guide look like? So each of these 6 options has a 2-page spread describing it in general. You see the graphics we have here, some pictures of examples from around the Great Lakes, links to related resources. And then we have for each of these types and techniques a more detailed case study, a map. This is for Sam Myers and the ecologically enhanced infrastructure. Sam Myers, a map of it and a description and pictures of before and after, some of the design considerations. So I didn't cover all the details because we have a guide for that. And then finally, we have a list of nature-based resource collections in our guide as well. So for more details, definitely check out the link in the guide, read up on these options. And again, as more options come, we're hoping to sort of keep this information updated in one form or another. But hopefully this can provide some of that vision of what these options look like on the Great Lakes at different water levels and things like that. So real briefly, I'll cover our second guide, Property Owner's Guide to Protecting Your Bluff. The tagline for this is help users assess obvious signs of bluff stability problems and think through potential management practices to enhance bluff stability. So really targeted at what can you do, what can you recognize on a bluff, and what can you do. So this was written chiefly by Lydia Salas, who's on the call, myself, Gene Clark, Julian Nordyke from Wisconsin Sea Grant, Tierney Boxey, who is a student, and Dan Carter, who worked at the Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. And so I'm just going to give a real quick overview of what this guide contains, an introduction to kind of the processes and reasons why Great Lakes coastal bluffs erode and what processes are important. And then underscoring the guiding principles of the guide, managing land use to keep structures as far from the bluff edge as possible, avoiding adding excess weight to the bluff top edge, directing surface water away from the bluff top edge, minimizing inputs to groundwater and removing excess groundwater that can cause slope stability issues, maintaining and enhancing bluff vegetation like deep-rooted native species, and then finally, if it's absolutely necessary, using well-designed shore protection structures to address bluff instability that can threaten buildings. As Amber said, we have increasingly hardening shorelines, so we didn't want to lead with this, but sometimes there's really no choice to save a building. So each chapter kind of has a list of issues to look out for, graphic representation of bluff cracks, where water is concentrating, noticing signs where a tree is tipping over, and then a review of kind of what practices are good at the bluff top. So setting your house back while still getting a nice view, minimizing impervious surfaces, maybe using permeable pavers, and then having native vegetation, establishing a view shed rather than clear cutting vegetation. So trying to get really nice visual depictions of some of these practices in action. And then chapter 3, bluff face and toe management. Again, what are some signs that there might be bluff stability issues? Noticing places where there's groundwater and erosion. And then what can you do about it? Slowing water down to help vegetation establish, and then if necessary, armored structures. So not covering all the details in there, but again, that's sort of the content that's in there. And then we do have a vegetation list for southeastern Wisconsin. May not be directly translatable up to the Lake Superior region, but we do have tables of shrubs, trees, and ground cover, 10 species of each, and different considerations. Now, these were all picked by the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. So we need to verify whether they're native and useful up on Lake Superior, but also written sort of descriptions of selected species and nice photos. So again, find that Wisconsin Sea Grant publication store. You can download both of these guides. Also have hard copies that we can send around if you think you've got some folks that would benefit from having these. And then finally, here's my contact information and a thank you to everyone who contributed these guides, as well as, again, acknowledging the funding which came from the NOAA Office of Coastal Management Coastal Resilience Grants Program. And I will try and make.
Thanks, Adam. I'm not sure you can hear us because of the microphone issues, but if you are able, give us a thumbs up. Thank you for, yay. Oh, good. Yay. Thanks for sharing both of those guides. And you folks, if you don't want to lose those, the links are in the chat if you want to click them open right now to find where they exist and on Sea Grant's webpage. We have time for maybe one question if someone wants to come off mute to ask. Otherwise, questions for Adam can maybe go in the chat. Maybe can take them from there. Does anyone have a question for Adam about these new resources? Burning questions. There's a lot in there and needed resources. Thanks, Adam. I'm sure people will be digesting and we'll circle back with you as they have questions about the resources. And for everyone on the call, if you think of something, go ahead and put it in the chat there. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we have just a short amount of time remaining, and if you're still on the line here, thanks for sticking around. The last presenter is me, actually, and I just wanted to take a very short amount of time to share with you all a project that is just getting underway. So maybe not worthy of a whole lot of time right now, but the spoiler here is I'm going to be asking you all for some input to help us guide this process. So I wanted to share with you all that as of this fall, and because we were awarded a grant to do this work, I am working with a collaborative team of folks to develop a Lake Superior focused and specifically Wisconsin shoreline focused planting guide or plant menu of plants that would be appropriate to plant in different coastal environments that we have here. And Adam just shared that list of vegetation that's appropriate for bluff planting, mainly focused on southeastern Wisconsin, and that was a really good inspiration for folks up here to think about that's a really great resource, but maybe doesn't hit all of our needs for plants up here in this climate and all of our different shoreline types. So how can we build on that good work to develop something that's appropriate for this region? And we know that folks are interested in more guidance about what to plant and where, because we've heard it in the various outreach venues that we're in. So, and that includes from all of you. So here are just some quotes I pulled out from some of the surveys and breakout groups that the chaos group is engaged in, that have sort of led us toward identifying this need. So we've heard that nature-based solutions are of value, and that co-benefits of plants would be nice to know about, like something that's harvestable. People are interested in ensuring that the appropriate plants are being used in the appropriate places. And that, there's just general acknowledgement. I think we've heard today that there's more and more interest in doing living shorelines integration. We know that vegetation is important, but a plant guide or menu would be helpful. So we're trying to be responsive to this need, this last underlined one in particular, by seeking some funding to develop a shoreline planting guide for this, for specifically the Wisconsin Lake Superior shoreline. So about a year ago, I worked with a collaborative team of folks from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, UW Superior, specifically the Lake Superior Research Institute, and our own graphic design team at Extension to put together a proposal for a planting guide for the region. So this is a project that's just now getting started because it was funded and will be developed over the coming 2 years. We're just at the very beginning of the project in terms of thinking about, well, what plants do we want to include in this guide? Why would we want to select particular plants for our projects? And, I think there's some obvious science-based ideas about what might be appropriate when we're considering what to put in the guide. Plants that are well suited to the shoreline environment and the climate that we have here is one. Plants with deep roots is another. Particularly interested in plants that can retain a lot of water, and ones that are likely to be climate survivors, particularly in new climate regimes. And these are all worthy of consideration and part of the work that we're doing, that our team is working on right now. But we're also interested in rationale for selecting plants that goes beyond sort of these institutional science-based reasons. So what are plants that support other beings? Are there plants that are important foods, medicines, or serve as other important materials for folks? And plants that have inherent value, particularly inherent cultural value. So we're really thinking holistically about what plants should be included in this guide. Part of what is unique about this planting guide process is that we are really integrating institutional science with Ojibwe cultural knowledge. And so what that means is that we're just now working out developing a cultural advisory group that can help us understand what might be important cultural considerations for inclusions of plants in this guide. We will certainly be looking to include as much Ojibwe Moan, the Ojibwe language, in this plant guide as possible, and want to consider what are appropriate plant stories that we might include that would be that would help tell the story of plant importance from an Ojibwe perspective. So really coming at this from a different ways of knowing approach, and all coming together to develop what we'll just for now call a menu, a plant guide or a plant menu of what plant beings you might turn to for your shoreline projects. And we would consider all the folks in this group to be possible potential users of this product. So here's the ask that I have for everyone here. Written into the grant is that I would ask the chaos group for their ideas about what you would see as important information to include in this planting guide, what you would want to elevate through this process. And so I'm going to post the link right now to our very short 5-question survey for our multiple choice, and then there's one open-ended question. I'm going to ask folks to just click on that link right now. We're right at the end of the meeting, but if you click on it and leave it open, you might come back to it later or during lunch. I know our project team would really value knowing what information you see as valuable to elevate in this guidance that we're looking to get underway. So there's the link. That's really it from me. It was a short presentation because it's a resource that doesn't yet exist, but we're working on it and we know it will be made better by input from all of you. So I will take questions if there are any. Otherwise, our project team would be grateful for your input at this early stage before we run out ahead. Any questions? Seeing and hearing none and noting the time, I will just turn then to close us out here. Thank you all for joining for our fall chaos meeting. We threw a lot of resources at you today that might be new to you. Probably some of them were, and I just want to thank those folks who shared today and got us all introduced to and oriented to some new resources. And I don't have anything to highlight to promote coming up unless other members of the steering committee have something to share. Otherwise, I'll just say thanks to folks for joining today. We will be holding a winter chaos member meeting as well. And hopefully we'll have a new coordinator on board to meet at that time. Thank you all for joining, and we'll catch you next time.